There are situations where we need to authenticate, but we cannot keep the credentials in the applications, specifically in the cloud applications. Well, in order to go through such situations, there is a savior known as Azure Managed Identities. Hello everyone, my name is Arun, and today we are going to talk about an Azure Managed Identities. So before we perform the demo and see how this can help us, let's try to understand what it is and why we need Azure Managed Identity. Okay, let's suppose this is our Azure tenant. Okay, you might be wondering why I'm writing tenant. I usually do Azure or on-premises or relevant stuff. Well, it's because this time it's about Azure AD because we are authenticating against Azure AD, and Azure AD is directly connected to tenant, right? Azure AD. All right, so let's suppose here is your developers station. VM, and he is writing code for cloud application. Okay. Now this cloud application need to authenticate itself against Azure AD to access the various Azure services. For example, we have different Azure services. Okay. All right. We have different Azure services. Let me represent it as AS. These are the Azure services. Could be a storage account. It could be SQL database. It could be any services that cloud application may require on Azure. So these are actually the Azure resources. Okay, and in order to access these resources, this application needs to authenticate itself from Azure AD. Okay, so authentication is required to access these, and we can't, our developer can't keep the credentials in the Azure in the code. We all know that that's not possible. Okay, and this developer cannot even check the code in the source control or NSCM that they are using, not in code and not in SCM, neither in code and nor in SCM. So where this credentials or secret should be placed so that this application can access the Azure services by authenticating itself through Azure AD. Okay, right? So in order to fix that, we have one more resource here that is also Azure resource. Okay, I'll tell you what I'm trying to say. Let's suppose this one is Azure Key Vault. Okay, and we all know that Azure Key Vault is to store passwords, secrets, right? So our application can easily keep the credentials or secrets or anything like that which is needed for authentication here in the Azure Key Vault. But as I said, this is also what? This is also a Azure resource, right? This is Azure resource. So in order to access this, cloud application also need to authenticate. All right, cloud authenticate. And this authentication would happen from where? From Azure AD, right? So let me mark this down here. This will like that. Whoa. Okay. Like this. So this thing is clear now, I think. Now, this situation seems a little odd because we need to authenticate even if we are keeping our secrets or credentials in Azure Key Vault, we still need to authenticate. So in order to fix these kind of situations, we have Azure managed identities. Okay. So if I need to say managed identities provide a secure method for authenticating Azure resources against the other Azure services without needing to include credentials. Managed identities is a feature of Azure AD which specifically provides an Azure resource with a managed identity within Azure AD. So it is more like, okay, it is more like this identity is managed by Azure. Okay, and this feature provides the ability to authenticate an Azure resource behind the scenes. This does not provide any implicit permission. Okay, that must still be configured separately. For example, we have two kinds of managed identities. Okay, let me take it further. But before we go, let's talk about a little more. This Azure Managed Identity provides Azure services with an automatically managed identity in Azure AD. Okay, you can use this identity to authenticate to any service that supports Azure AD authentication. Let me write this down. Maybe it's getting a little confusing. Okay. All right. Managed identity is automatically managed by Azure. Okay. And can be used to authenticate to any service that supports Azure AD auth. Okay, including Key Vault. Okay, so in this Azure Managed Identity is free of cost. You need not to pay anything for it. Okay, now internally Azure Managed Identities are just like a service principal. Let me try to explain it here. Let's suppose this is our Azure Managed identity. What it is just like a service principal. but it is a special kind, which are locked to only be used with Azure resources. Okay. Resources. And when the managed identity is deleted, the corresponding service principal is automatically removed. Okay. Now, what is actually happening? We are creating a managed identity. Okay. There is a separate resource that you can create as a managed identity. Now you are providing RBAC role to managed identity, which is required as per your application, and you are attaching that managed identity to your, let's suppose, Azure VM where your application is running. So there is no credentials stored in the Azure VM, but still Azure VM has a managed identity attached to it, which has a role assigned to it, so you can access everything as per the permissions or authorization that a role has. For example, if it is a contributor role, you can do everything except the assigning access to others. Okay, makes sense. So it is more like you are creating Azure managed identity. Then what you're doing, you are assigning a role, assigning a role to MI, let's suppose managed identity. Okay, now what you're doing, come on. Now once this is assigned, you are connecting this or attaching this to the Azure VM or resource where it's required. In our case, it is Azure VM where the application is running. Okay, so it's that simple. Now, the thing is, managed identities are of two kinds. It could be a system assigned, or it could be system assigned, or it could be user assigned. We'll do the lab for both of these so that it will help us to understand what exactly the difference is or how these managed identities work. There is not much difference. You can see user assigned is like we are creating a managed identity, we are assigning a role and attaching to the system. Now here, system is already there. You're directly attaching the managed identity to the system. Okay, so system assigned managed identity is enabled directly on an Azure service instance. For example, this is the VM we talked about. This is the VM, and we created user assigned identity, assigned a role, and attach it. If it is system assigned, then this thing, come on, then this thing can directly, or this thing can directly attach to this Azure VM. Okay, then it is system assigned. But if you're creating a managed identity and then assigning role and assigning it to it, that would be user assigned. Okay, the difference you can easily see, it is attached with the system, so its life cycle is as long as the system is there, but user assigned would stay there until you delete this identity separately, not the resource. You can delete the resource, managed identity will still remain in the system, in the Azure AD. Okay, and you can share across Azure resources. User assigned, you can share across Azure resources, but you cannot share the system assigned, because it is attached to the system. It's not separated. All right, so that's all about managed identity, a common understanding, the difference between user assigned and system assigned, why we need it. Hope this would help to understand. And in next video, we'll do this thing in the lab, okay, and talk about a little more on the managed identity. Thank you. Thank you for watching.